Hey guys, this is Carrie, and in this video, we're going to add a score to our game. But before we do that, I think there's a little bit of a problem with our character eating the food items, which is that as soon as our character gets close, it feels like it eats the food item a little bit too soon. So the way that we did this mathematically last time was we said that we should eat the food. Let's go back into our code and try to find that. So it should be in our set interval loop. So for each food, we check to see if we eat the food by finding the distance between the player and each food item. And then we check to see if that distance is less than 65. So if we want the player to have to get closer to the center of the food to eat it, what we can do is we can make this collision distance that we're checking against a little bit less. So I'm going to make that 45 and refresh my page to see if that looks any better. So unfortunately, remember that when I'm recording these videos, it's super laggy. So here we go. We get a little bit more, we get actually a little bit of overlap, which I think is a better collision. And so you can play around with this collision radius, which is the distance that we have to be in order to collide, to get your graphics to look how you want them to look. All right, so let's get back to our objective at hand, which is to add a score to our game. So, because the score will change over the course of the game, up here when we create our canvas and context variables, I think we should also create a score variable. So let's let our score start at 0. And this is really important that we're creating this variable outside of all of the other code. Because we really don't want that score variable to live in a specific function. We really want it to be accessible everywhere kind of in our game. All right, so we do let score equals 0. Now, what's going to increase our score is when we eat a consumable or we eat a food item. So here, if the distance is less than 45, that's when we eat the food item. So why don't I add a little comment here? If the distance is less than 45, the player eats the food. And so when the player eats the food, what we want to do is we want to remove the food. Oh my gosh, the lag thing is really crazy here. It's so hard to type. Remove the food and then create a new food. Why does it keep adding periods? I don't think that's me typing that. But before we create the new food, let's actually add to our score. So our score is 0 previously, or if our score is 1,000, I think every time we eat a food item, we should increase the score by 100. So let's say the new score is equal to the old score plus 100. And then I'm going to do a console.log here. And I'm just going to log the score to see if it's working. All right, so I'm going to open up the JavaScript console here. A million years later, because of the video, it loads. Let's do a refresh. And let's see if every time we eat the food, it logs our score. So it should be 100. And then for the next food, 200. Great. So the only thing that's missing now is to display the score on the screen. So we're going to be displaying it, I think, kind of in this corner of the canvas. So what that makes me think is the same way that in our set interval loop, we always draw the background, we update the player, we draw the player, and then for each food item, we draw the food item. I think it would be useful for us to draw the score as well. So I'm going to go into the set interval loop before the code block that includes the entire repeating function closes. I'm going to say, we should also write the score. I'm going to put draw in parentheses there. Write the score, draw on the screen. I guess. Write the score, and then draw should be here. Okay, cool. So I'm going to create a draw score function. And I'm going to run it here. But in order to run drawScore, we actually need to define it the same way that we defined drawing food and so forth. So here, after the food functions, before the get distance one, I'm going to add function draw score. All right, so to draw the score, I looked up the HTML canvas reference, and it's this collection of every single function that we can run on our canvas. So there's a couple of good ones here, which is the font, the text align, and the text baseline. These are going to be properties that I might set to help me with drawing the score, but I'm just going to start off with fill text. So let's see how fill text works. Okay, so you can set the font, ctx.font equals, and you can bring in even a Google font here, I think. But there's one font that every computer has that I think will work well with this, which is called monospace. So I'm going to set my function or my font to draw with monospace. Let's see if that works. I'll tell you if it does. This is my first time using it, so it will be an interesting experience. And then we'll do ctx.fillText. And the text that we want to fill is going to be score ... space plus whatever the score is. And let's see, I guess we should do the color as well, right? So I think for the color, we do it the same way with the fill style here. So let's set the fill style equal to blue, because we haven't used a blue color yet. So set the font, set the fill style, fill the text. All right, let's see if that works. I think fill text should probably get some other variables. Here we go. Fill text also needs x and y coordinates. So I'm thinking about the x and y coordinates up here. Hopefully it's based on the top left of the font rectangle. So I'm just going to say maybe 20, 20. So that it's symmetrically 20 to the right and 20 down. Let's see how that looks. We can always tweak these things afterwards. So for me, it looks a little bit too far to the right. So let me make it 10 only. 10 still looks a little bit far, so you can keep playing around with these numbers and refreshing it until it looks kind of the way you want it to look. There we go. For me, that's perfect. So let's see if our score updates. Nice. And it's really important that we're drawing our score every frame, because if you remember before with our backgrounds, if we don't draw the background, the player, the food, and the score every frame, then what will happen is the score will disappear. And so that's why we have the draw score function running as one of the commands inside of the set interval loop, is we really need to display this text every frame so that the score stays on the screen. All right, so there's a lot more that you can do with fonts. You might think to make an extra, like a lives thing, to keep track of the number of lives that your player has left. Maybe when our score reaches 1,000, lives goes up by 1, or when it reaches 2,000, lives goes up by 1 again. That could be really interesting to think about. Maybe you want to add a text effect so that when you eat the consumable, it displays yum across the center of the screen, or yum in the place where the consumable was. You could even have like a welcome screen that would explain the rules. And then later we're going to think to make a game over screen, which will involve the text as well. Last challenge would be, can you figure out how to incorporate Google fonts so you have a little bit more versatility in the text that you're using? So hopefully you have enough to think about in terms of making your game customizable today, and you have a score that works. I'll see you later today. Bye.